What's going on, Ambitious Vet? Welcome to episode number 69 of the Ambitious Vet Show with retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, author, and founder of Lewis Advisors, LLC, Matthew J. Lewis. Welcome to the Ambitious Vet, where we believe if you desire more, you have to become more. My name is Chris Hoffman, Marine Corps combat veteran turned passion-driven entrepreneur. On this show, I dive into the trenches with today's top military veteran thought leaders and subject matter experts who know what it takes to not only pay the bills after the military, but really make an impact. You're going to hear great stories, some failures, and even some golden grenades that you can implement immediately to excel in what matters most in your life right now. Are you tired of feeling like you're surviving life? Would you like to gain the perspective needed to know how to leverage the tools you've gained in life? I mean, how would you like to finally move from feeling lost to living on purpose once and for all? If you answered yes, you're in the right place. Now you just simply have to start betting on yourself and go join our free 10-day Being Bulletproof Challenge, where you're going to gain your 10 orders to mastering the inner game with daily video tips, engaged community, daily email reminders, and intense accountability that will either push you up or push you out. The challenge is not for anybody. It's just looking for more insights in life. Results are going to be the name of this game. You can join by simply going to www.facebook.com/groups/Being Bulletproof Challenge. I'll also put the link in the show notes below. Challenge officially ends on October 19th, 2019, right before our next Ambitious Vet Sprint goes live. So if you're ready to finally take on the challenge and elevate your performance, I look forward to seeing a few of you go from warrior made to passion driven. What's going on, Ambitious Vet? Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Vet Show. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending the one asset that we never get back in life, which is time. I promise you this is going to be well worth your time. Just a few key golden grenades I want you to be listening for when you're hearing Matthew J. Lewis talk inside this interview is just the power of not putting all your eggs in one basket and how that creates long-term sustainability in your life, to where really you do become bulletproof to life adversities, obstacles, and stuff like that. Also, listen for what are the 3 reasons why veterans struggle during the transition to the civilian workforce. I really loved his perspective on that and some practical golden grenades that you can go and implement immediately. He talks about the significance of the loss that we leave out of the uniform when we lose our rank, our respect, our awards that we have on our chest or sleeve, depending on what branch you're in, and the power of how do we gain that self-respect back. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce who Matthew J. Lewis is. He is a graduate of West Point and retired lieutenant colonel. He spent more than 25 years in the uniform and 20 years in the corporate world. Today, he leads global strategy and transformation projects at Deloitte, the largest professional services firm in the world, and continues to serve several veteran collaboratives around the country. Matt is author of the brand new book, Mission Transition, a practical guide for veterans in transition and their employers. He coaches individuals on their transition efforts and advises employers on hiring programs designed to successfully assimilate these valuable talent pools. Ambitious Vet, I hope you got a pen and paper. If you're running, hiking, whatever, hope you have your mental notepad ready. Let's go ahead and dive into the trenches with Matthew J. Lewis. Let's go get it. Matthew, are you there?
I'm here, Chris. Thanks so much. Appreciate the introduction and having me on. I look forward to sharing what I've done with the crew here you've got.
Awesome, and we're absolutely honored to have you here. Can you go ahead and fill in the gaps in that introduction? Let us know a little about something that personal, like something that no one really knows about Matthew.
Okay. I'll call this the little known facts. And I'll kind of subdivide. Just a couple more I'll add on the professional side. Some of my things that I'm doing as well in the community, and then a few personal things to your question. So I also co-chair our local CVEB, Community Veteran Engagement Board. I assume some of you know what that is. You mentioned veteran collaboratives. I'm on the board of our local one here in Cincinnati. That's the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance. On the personal side, let's see. My wife's a physician. Proud dad to three boys, a 16-year-old who's getting ready to drive, and twins that are 11. So it's a fun time around our house. I'm the first member of my high school to graduate from West Point. And in doing so, in my first year there, I managed to get a D in my English class, which begs the question, what the hell I'm doing writing books. I'm an old offensive lineman that's run 2 marathons. And a final little known fact, I assume everybody knows who Ken Griffey Jr. is, Baseball Hall of Fame. Yes. I beat Ken Griffey Jr. in a pickup basketball game when I was a kid.
Now that's a great fact. And he seems tall too. He seems tall, like he could dunk a basketball or something like that too.
Yeah,
so.
he lived in my neighborhood, and he would just oftentimes be roaming around, and he came by talking trash one day. So I called him out on it, and I beat him 2 out of 3 in my backyard. He probably won't remember it. Even if he does, he probably won't admit it, but I have witnesses. So
come on, man. That's all that matters is social proof, right?
There you go.
All right. So Matthew, tell us about like getting out of the uniform as Lieutenant Colonel and how long it took you to gain traction and how you actually did that.
Yeah. So actually I left active duty way back in 1996 after 5 active, and I did another 16 in the reserves, and that was all following time at the academy. So I transitioned in a couple different ways. One, obviously into the civilian world. I chose graduate school as my vehicle for doing that, and then transitioned from active to reserve service simultaneously. For me, at least on the civilian side, I mean, I struggled with this. I was no different than I think most people getting out of the service these days. And I struggled with really, the first time in my life, having to ponder just who the hell am I as an individual, and what do I want to do with, the balance of my life with all these skills I've picked up in the military. I thought initially, I wanted to go into human resources. That has to do with people, and being a leader in the Army, that has to do with people. So I thought it was a parallel, but the more I got to learn about it, the more it didn't make sense. I considered automotive because that was my undergrad major, but I did an internship in automotive and quickly realized that wasn't for me. I pondered the banking industry, and that didn't turn out. So I happened upon a book at the time. It's called What Color Is Your Parachute? Dick Bowles is the author, perennial, decades-long bestseller on job change. It has a number of different exercises in it, which I took to heart and did it. Among those were personality tests that helped me determine what my personal strengths were, what my interests were, kind of opened my eyes. It was the first time I began to understand this. I also undertook what were called informational interviews with individuals in industry where I thought I had an interest, and after kind of shadowing them over time, began to understand what was going to work for me, what didn't work for me. And I also quickly discovered through that process the value in networking. I mean, not only did it help me clarify my goals, it opened the doors to an entirely new way of thinking, an entirely new way of making things happen. So that's the short answer. I could go on and tell you a few more stories about my experience applying to business school or my internship in business school, which were colorful to say the least.
Yeah, it's always fun when it's colorful. That's when you're having the most fun, when it's colorful, right? So I get it. So, I mean, Ambitious Vet, if you're watching this live, you're listening to this on the podcast. I mean, seeking self-knowledge is one of the biggest things that you could ever focus on when you're getting out of the uniform. Understanding who you are. Once you understand what you value, what you interest, what your strengths, just like Matthew's saying here, you're able to actually identify what corporations, what company cultures that you want to be integrating in. And this is Golden Grenade City. So Matthew, I really appreciate it. So Matt, back to you. I mean, what's been one of the biggest failures that you've had to endure in this journey, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey.
I'm sure. Yeah.
You mentioned the numbers up front, so I tend to be on the older side if you got older folks listening. But suffice it to say, I've learned a lot over the years, and I think what I have learned I've encompassed in the book and will apply to a lot of people and their career paths out there. To speak to a number of failures, the last question you had there were a couple failures up front there. I could go back and tell those stories, but the one I'll focus on here was, after I'd kind of landed in the corporate world. So here, just to set up the story, I had just completed a corporate relocation across the country. I moved from Dallas to Milwaukee. There's a separate interesting story about getting pulled over by a cop. I won't get into that. At this new job, I was the only manager overseeing all 3 shifts of 7 different product lines at this plant. And what little time I had at home was spent sleeping on the floor of my new house, because the way my wife and I had done things at the time, I would go forth with a new job over a couple of months, scout out the new area, lock in a house, and she would follow with all the household goods and whatnot. I'm sure folks are intimately familiar with that process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this went on for 2 or 3 months until my wife, who I mentioned as a physician, uprooted her practice and moved all the way across the country to join me. She was, at that time, newly pregnant with my oldest son. And within a week of her arrival, literally, I was called into the office by HR and was told I was being let go as part of an organization-wide RIF, a reduction in force. And so there I was, without a job, with a wife without a job who was newly pregnant, and our whole house in boxes, just being dumped off at the front door. So that was a tough time, high stress. But one thing you take with you from the military is perspective and resiliency. You're going to get kicked down, as you do in the military, as what happens in life. But as military teaches you, you just keep getting back up and keep getting back in the fight. And so that's what I did. I eventually landed in another role. My wife secured a job, but I walked away from that situation with a few lessons that I've been implementing ever since. One of which was, never put all your eggs in a single basket, career-wise. Nothing lasts forever. You as an individual are expendable, so make sure you're training those around you and below you to step into your shoes should you get hit by a bus. And the other thing is, you need to look out for yourself and be okay with what you have. You had one of your podcasts past few months is Wally Carmichael. I was on his as well. And I love his message about abundance and, being okay with enough. No one when enough is enough. And so that's, ever since then, I've kind of had a side hustle, but I've always taken care of my finances so that, if I got whacked again, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's so on the court and so practical. I love that, Matthew. I talked to a Marine Corps vet this morning while I was on my way to the gym this morning. It was the same thing. He put all his eggs in one basket, was passionate about real estate wholesale investing, closed a couple deals with that, but wind up walking away because he got very comfortable with this lump sum of commission sales that he's getting in this new sales career. And he got laid off this morning, and he felt like when he took off that military uniform, he just felt like his whole identity was gone and like, what's going on? So I think that principle right there on just nailing it down, to always have something else that you're leaning on, right? And building, so you don't ever lose that sense of identity and purpose. Wouldn't you agree, Matt?
Absolutely. And the outcome of that side hustle, if you will, over the course of the many years it's taken me to pull it together is the book, Mission Transition, and all of your listeners, I hope, will benefit from it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know I'm excited about it. I know everyone that's listening to this is excited to hear more about this. Now, what are the 3 reasons why veterans struggle during the transition to the civilian workforce that you found, Matt?
Oh, that's a content-rich question there.
Yeah.
So let me get at this. I'll highlight your 3 points, but there's a lot of meat around the 3 points. So if I may, the first is there's a combination of what I'll say is a lack of guidance, and combined with the mission first culture of the military that tends to drive fear of the unknown, because any guidance pushed forward or put forth is towards the tail end of your service there. That combined with what I'll call a lack of focus on who versus what, I'll say more about that in a minute, tends to result in folks getting out, taking a job just to replace a revenue stream, just to have some income, versus landing in an optimal career field. So let me tease that out a little bit. This is,
Please.
all point one. So, I mentioned earlier, what color is your parachute? Dick Bowles, and he's done, decades of studies on this. Job hunts, career searches that start with doing research on yourself, the who, your personal strengths, passions, that results in success 84% of the time. The current, SFL TAP, Soldier for Life, Transition Assistance Program, Marine for Life, what have you, whatever the permutation is for your service, it starts with a focus on the job market, which sets you up for a less than 28% success rate, at least by Dick Bowles' accounting. Because of that lack of guidance, service members struggle to find their place in the world, who they are and what they want to do. Given the mission first culture, they tend to leave without sufficiently pondering who they are, what they want to be, and end up taking a job that's to have any job. And, figuring that out first is incredibly important. Just one last stat here. Studies show that veterans who can find a role in their optimal career field upon leaving active duty will double their career earnings, their rates of retention, and job satisfaction. It's critically important. So that's collectively point one. Point two is, I think people getting out, especially today, have a lack of understanding of the civil-military gap that exists and continues to grow, and what impact that ultimately has for them. So a couple points here. Never forget that you're part of the less than 0.5% of the American population that has served on active duty since 9/11. Secondly, those folks that you're interviewing with likely have little to no idea who you are as a veteran, what you've done, or what you can do. Even more, they're not going to take the time to learn. So the onus is going to be on you as the transitioning veteran to do the translation for them. And it doesn't matter if you're getting out after, an initial enlistment, or if you're a senior leader. This applies to senior leaders as well, retirees. Just a couple statistics here. Since 1980, there's been more than a 90% drop in the executives of the Fortune 1000 that have any military experience whatsoever. Today, that percentage, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, is 2.5%. So even if you're a leader applying for a senior role, there's a better than a 97% chance that the person interviewing you has no idea who you are, what you've done, or what you can do. So that's collectively point two. The third is it's all about loss and what that loss entails. I think veterans don't understand or appreciate until they get knee deep in it what they're going to experience in terms of loss getting out. Think about it. When you leave the military, you lose a real part of your identity. You lose your rank. You lose the awards you wear on your chest, the instant respect that comes with those things. In losing your rank, you lose whatever authority that came with that rank. You no longer have UCMJ authority. You can't bark orders, expect that they'll be carried out. You lose the camaraderie of peers that have, you've bled and went off to combat with. In fact, that cooperation, that camaraderie is a lot of times replaced by competition in the civilian world. You lose the certainty of a chain of command and an organizational hierarchy. You lose your built-in community support network, common things like schools, shopping, same BX, PX, One Stop, the club system, etc. You lose standard routines, SOPs, references, things that guide your daily work. You lose the tax-free nature of all of the allowances or combat pay you're getting. So long story short, the loss is significant and hits almost every aspect of your life. You got to realize you're entering entirely new communities with entirely new cultures that have entirely new expectations. You got to adjust your approach accordingly.
Yeah, thank you for that wealth of knowledge. It really is a fire hose, but I think if an ambitious vet could get just one drop of that water and start implementing it, this is a trend that I'm even seeing over here with all these interviews and even some, veterans I've been coaching myself as well. Is like, I'm seeing that this whole competition, collaboration, to competition culture and way of life as social norms out of the uniform is due to like veterans being more isolated and stuff like that. And really hiding behind the wall of the internet, trying to research there and not having that social engagement. Therefore, their networking skills aren't there and all that. So I really love that you nailed that down right there. So, you've already, said a lot about, kind of why you've written this book, Mission Transition, Navigating the Opportunities and Obstacles to Your Post-Military Career. But I want to hear from your words. Why did you write this? And what's your vision for veterans in reading this book?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wrote it because I think there's an incredible need for it. But just a little story to set the context. Anger tends to be the strongest emotion. And when it comes down to it, it was me getting pissed off. So let me explain how that came to be. I left active duty, as I explained, way back in 1996. And there was really no transition program back then to speak of. ACAP, as it was called at the time. I was an Army guy, Army Career Alumni Program. They literally administered it within the last 5 days of you being on active duty. And, it was at best ineffective. But my experience, and I kind of spoke to it earlier, caused me to start to put together a process of sorts. And knowing that, others were going through it, I kind of started to reach back just on a one-on-one individual coaching basis to help others with this, quasi process that I developed at the time. And over the course of years, continued to tweak it and add to it, I got two consistent forms of feedback. One was a message of gratitude. Hey, thanks for helping me out. Two was, hey, we really got to find a way to scale what you're doing, because there's incredible need. There's thousands of people, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people getting out of the service every year. You got to find a way to scale this. Have you ever thought about writing a book? To which I would laugh, because, as I mentioned before, I got a D in plebe English. I don't write books. But, fast forward a little bit more, 20, 25 years. Now I've got, good battle buddies, blood brothers and sisters that have been downrange, devoted their entire adult lives and their families' lives to serving the nation, undergoing multiple deployments, combat or otherwise. And I see them getting out of the service, and in spite of the additional funds and focus put at it, really ending up in pretty much the same way that I got out of the service, kind of left fending for themselves. And that to me was the spark. That's what pissed me off enough to say, you know what, this stops right now, and I'm going to do something about it. Nobody may ever read it, nobody may care, but I wanted to get down on paper what I've seen to work for so many folks out there. So just on that note, let me just hum a few bars on the book itself and why I think it is helpful. It's a practical guide for veterans in career transition, their families, and their prospective employers. It tries to focus on this primary question: how can veterans realize their full potential by avoiding false starts and suboptimal career choices? It's written in, everyone knows what a field manual is. It's written in a field manual-like manner, something a veteran would implicitly understand. Crawl, walk, run, step 1, 2, 3, lots of exercises, lots of pictures. Don't believe me, but believe the folks that have endorsed it. It's been endorsed by generals, astronauts, Super Bowl winners, war college professors, sitting and retired members of Congress, best-selling authors. So I'm obviously biased because I wrote it, but I don't think you're going to find a better book on this topic in the market. And as you know, there's an awful lot written about it. I'm similarly confident that this effort is going to significantly improve the lives of veterans, both here and abroad, if we can just expose them to its content. My great hope is that this work, combined with other pieces I'm working on, is going to help address the ever-growing civil military gap that I talked about earlier in the country today.
Yeah. And, Matthew, I spent time on that website too, and I saw all the resources that piggyback off this book. And it really is like practical guides from the content that they're going to be reading from this field guide book. And I just love how much work you put in this. It wasn't just like, let's write something up. You really did put the thought through years and years of doing it and building a team around it. And, you've done a great job. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes below in the podcast, and the link inside the bio of this live interview inside the Ambitious Vet Tribe, so everyone can actually go and start seeking out these resources that you have narrowed your focus down range to make sure that they're hitting their targets. Because that's all we want to do when we get out of the uniform, is hit our targets, man.
No, I appreciate it, and again, I can't thank you enough. I will be criticized, I'm sure, by the English professors out there, as I said. But there's one thing they won't be able to criticize me on, and that's that I didn't do my homework. There's a ton of research that went into this.
Yeah, sometimes that's all you need to do is know the facts, right? So we have a tradition here, Matthew. 3 golden grenades. What would be 3 golden grenades that you would drop in here to blow up any ambitious vet's life that's looking to become known for something right now?
Gotcha. So, in the context of transition here are my 3. The first is, I mentioned a lot of negative stats before, but the first one here is take heart. There is a place for you and your personal strengths and passions in the world. A happy ending, if you will, awaits you, but it's going to take some work. I mean, transition is not easy. We all bear the scars of having gone through it ourselves. Hopefully my book will help you limit your scars, but it's critical that you go through the work, that you go through the process. Again, studies show if you do the work and you get in your proper career field from the outset, you're going to double your career earnings, rates of retention, job satisfaction. Another reason to take heart. Recent studies have shown that 90% of HR managers say veterans are promoted faster than their non-veteran peers. And 68% of that same group said that veterans perform better or much better than their non-veteran peers. And I guess a final reason to take heart is you now have in your hand in the form of Mission Transition, a great guide for it. But let me circle back to the book in a minute. Second gold grenade would be the importance of tribe. And what I mean by that is, when you get out, make sure you join a business resource group, some other group, whether it's at work or in your community, where you're surrounded by veteran peers. And there's literally, hundreds, if not thousands of these in the communities. I'm talking about things like Team RWB, Commit Foundation, Wound Warriors, et cetera. How I have tried to incorporate this concept of tribe into the book is via case studies. I mean, there's dozens of individuals that I interviewed, and I interspersed their individual thoughts throughout the book in what I call troops in the trenches. And I took that approach purposely because successful transition takes a tribe. And I wanted the reader to have the sense that they're surrounded by a tribe. There is an entire army of brothers and sisters awaiting you on the other side. And don't be afraid to reach out. I also wanted to the reader understand there's a diversity of viewpoints. So I purposely reached out to include, men, women, people of color, all the services, officers, enlisted, junior ranks, senior ranks, et cetera. And lastly, I guess I want people to see a diversity and number of viewpoints. I'm a single person. I'm but one data point and have one opinion. But if that opinion is backed up by research and proof points from dozens of others, it tends to have greater validity. So that's gold grenade 2. Gold grenade 3 would be a little guide, my personal guide in terms of how to approach the book. I have a fear that some will pick it up and say, I just need a resume. Let me flip to that chapter. Or I just need to brush up an interview. Let me turn to that chapter. This thing is a process and is intended to be read from start to finish, front to back. In doing so, I would say start early, at least a year, if not 2 years. If you know what your ETS date's going to be, start this thing early and get a head start on it. Take advantage of the resource. You mentioned resources on my website. There's a ton of stuff on there, and we talk later. I'll tease out some of the specifics about what that is. The website's intended to be used in conjunction with the book. Don't skip parts of the process, as I mentioned, and then, much like I said earlier, use it as a field manual, but kind of that crawl, walk, run approach as you're going through it. Read a chapter, apply the chapter, and then come back to the next one. So those are my 3.
That's awesome, Matt. I mean, it's just like anything in life, right? If you were in your own respected branch, your own uniform, if you're in there right now and you're listening to this, or you're watching us live or on replay, think about it. If you did shortcuts in your job there, would the outcome be your desired outcome? It probably wasn't. So don't be skipping steps, just like you weren't skipping steps in the uniform. Do things the way they're designed to be done. Do complete work in your life, and you'd be surprised how fast you build a quality reputation, but also just a quality personal brand that is long-term profitable in your life. So, Matt, where can people go learn more about where you're at? Where can they go and get this book right now? If someone's watching this and it's like, I want to pick up this book right now, where can people go find more about you?
Sure. So the book was published by HarperCollins, one of the largest publishers in the world. So pretty much any online or brick and mortar retailer is going to have it or be able to order it. So it's plentiful in terms of its availability.
Nice.
In terms of reaching out to me, you mentioned my website. That's MatthewJLewis.com, Lewis as in St. Louis. So check it out there. You mentioned all of the resources, and I offer that to everyone. Just a quick backstory on all of the content that's there. So as a first-time author, I discovered many things through the publishing process, one of which is publishers have word limits. And my manuscript was 100,000 words, and yet they had a 70,000 word limit. So I wasn't about to let those 30,000 words go to waste. And so they're all available for free now on my book. One caution is, well, not a caution, more of an admonition. All of that content is intended to be used in concert with the book. And in the book, I call out the places where, hey, here's an exercise, here's a template, but you got to go to my website to do it or to perform it. So you got to do them in tandem. But just to give your listeners and viewers a flavor of what's out there, things like, the very detailed financial exercises, understanding what you're going to need, how much money you're going to need in light of taxation issues at state and what have you, how to negotiate, little exercise to help you negotiate what your benefits are as part of a compensation package. There's a full chapter there with advice for those in the Guard or the reserves. That's a lot of good stuff in there. A compendium of lessons learned, a military to civilian thesaurus, sample resumes, cover letters, thank you notes, guidance on a new wardrobe, details on veteran collaboratives, apprenticeships, additional reading lists, as well as a host of additional tools, templates, resources. The list goes on and on. There's a ton of stuff out there, so have at it.
Yeah. And I love it because the book's going to give them perspective, and the resources are going to be something they can lean on for tools. I mean, that's one of the things I've found with transition is lack of perspective. You don't even know how to deal with all the resources out there. So I love it, Matt. And back at you, man, I just want to acknowledge you for who you are, man. Spending over 25 years as a lieutenant colonel in the Army to spending 20 years in the corporate world. Thank you for coming back and just spilling your wisdom into this book. And thank you for who you are for our community. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Chris. I appreciate having me. I hope the book helps, and anyone else that has questions, follow up. I'm here for you. That's why I did this. That's why I put it out there. Feel free to reach out, and I'll be glad to engage and help you with your own mission.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, there you have it, Ambitious Vet, episode number 69 of the Ambitious Vet Show with Matthew J. Lewis. If you haven't already, go subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so you can get these continuous golden grenades week by week so we can continue to empower you to be unstoppable and unstuck in areas of life that matter most to you. Also, feedback is what allows anything to improve in life, and we want to improve in the trenches right beside you. So if you have any feedback, please reach out to me directly at choffman@vettrainingcoaching.com. That's 2 F's as in Fox, 2 N's as in Nigel, choffman@vettrainingcoaching.com. Would love to improve right beside you. Lastly, if you're listening to this, I already know you're warrior made. But to become passion driven, utilize this one golden grenade you heard today. You're going to find your life being more meaningful. Ambitious Vet, let's go get it.